Hey guys, Carissa Boyton here from the Smartsettle team, and I'm going to be showing you a steel strap supply agreement with Smartsettle Infinity. I'm going to share my screen and show a quick PowerPoint first to set the scene, and then we will go into Smartsettle Infinity. So here we are, upgrading the way the world negotiates. So the Smartsettle collaborative negotiation process starts with a modeling phase and the intention to work towards a mutually beneficial agreement. And we then go into the solution phase, which happens within Smartsettle Infinity, and I'll be showing you exactly how that all works. So the first step is for the parties to build a single negotiating framework. This is like the final agreement, but with blanks for the values of the issues being negotiated. So the parties together identify all of the issues that they want to negotiate and a range for each of those issues. So you can see here we've got the price for steel strap, seals, and edge board, a negotiating range for each of those, and then a number of other issues. So here we're looking at satisfaction. You can see that the supplier is 100% satisfied up here at the top left, and buyer is 100% satisfied here at the bottom right. And we're looking for a solution that is somewhere on the efficiency frontier. Our next step is to map out the minimum satisfaction of the buyer and the supplier. So we've got those mapped out there, and then we've got a zone of possible agreement over here. Our next step is to get the supplier and the buyer to each put an optimistic proposal on the table. And you can see here that the optimistic proposals of buyer and supplier fall below that minimum satisfaction threshold for the other party. We can then use Smartsettle Infinity to generate suggestions. So suggestions are semi-optimal packages that fall in between the proposals of the parties. And some of them will fall into that zone of possible agreement. Now in Smartsettle Infinity, we negotiate in sessions. And if there's a mutually accepted package, then at the end of that session, a mutually accepted package will become a baseline. And at that point, we can run the maximize the minimum gain algorithm and take that baseline out to the efficiency frontier for a fair and efficient solution. And we do that by implementing Dr. Ernest Thiessen's algorithm called maximize the minimum gain. So that's how it looks for two parties. If you have more than two parties, 3 or any number, then the efficiency frontier just looks like this. So we're going to look at this negotiation mainly from a supplier's point of view. So you're looking at a screenshot of Smartsettle Infinity here, and the way we organize things there is that supplier's best outcome is going to be on the right, and on the left-hand side is going to be the worst outcome. Now, here are supplier's private formulas for his satisfaction. You see we've got return on sales here, which is a function of strap, edge, and seal unit price. We've got annual profit, which is a function of minimum order size, invoicing, volume, and contract term. And then we've got payment terms, price index interval, order lead time, and markup variance. And those 6 issues make up supplier's total satisfaction. So you can see here that we've got those same issues here in purple. Those are the ones that are included in satisfaction, and these issues in black, again, are reflected within those issues. So you can see here that there are numbers associated with each of these purple issues, and those are importance numbers. So at 252 points, return on sales is the most important to supplier. And at 10 points, markup variance is the least important to supplier. Now, it's also possible to tie these importance numbers to a dollar figure, for example. So you can see here we have an issue of annual profit with a range of $0 to $200,000. And we've put 200 points there, making each satisfaction point worth $1,000. So then you can take that to understand that for order lead time, for example, the difference between 24 hours and 168 hours is worth $19,000. And markup variance, the difference between 0 and 50% is worth $10,000. So this scenario is based on real data. And so we had a prior contract package to work with. Now, a package here in Smartsettle means that we've identified a value for each of the issues being negotiated. So these red flags represent an entire package, and these flags in particular represent the prior contract package. So the goal of this data analysis was to do better than the prior contract package. So during the Smartsettle Infinity process, we usually create a number of other packages to represent various points in the negotiation. Okay, now before we look at the results here in the PowerPoint, we're actually going to go into Infinity and look at the negotiation there. So here you're seeing the shared information screen of Smartsettle Infinity. We've got the parties up here, and you can see that I've got a robot playing the role of the buyer. And we've got our issues here, as well as the ranges for those issues. So the next place we're going to go is to the private graphic view of the supplier. Now this view is private just to the supplier. It's password protected and very secure, and only the supplier would ever have access to this screen. So you can see that we've done all the work of inputting the data. We've got our 6 issues here that are included in preferences, and then we've got our issues here in the black that are represented within those issues. So if you want to take a closer look at the constraints and the workings all behind that, you remember that the satisfaction for return on sales was a function of price, seal, and edge board. If you want to take a closer look at that, you can go in here to the private formulas. And the private formulas and various assumptions that were behind this model are all listed here. And there are some shared constraints that the parties agree on as well that are listed in the shared constraints box. Okay, so this pane here is the editing pane and the package viewer. So here we have 4 packages that we have pre-built. We've got an optimistic package. So these values represent an optimistic outcome for this negotiation, something that the supplier is willing to negotiate down from. So we've got the prior contract represented here. And you can see that compared to the prior contract, if you remember that we've got the satisfaction based around the annual profit. So 1 point is worth $1,000. So this prior contract is worth $501,000, and this optimistic would be improving on that prior contract by $161,000. So it would be quite a large improvement. And you can see we've also identified some other packages here. We've identified a concession package as well as a resistance level. So you can see the resistance level has 521 points. So that's a $20,000 improvement on the prior contract. So that's what we're aiming for, to do as good as that or better. So if you want to see how these points work, these points here, if you added them all up, they would add up to 645. And if I want to make a new package here, it comes in at 0 and with a question mark. That's because I've got them set up to show up mostly on the left-hand side, and that package in particular does not obey the constraints. So as I start pulling these flags over, for example, if I pull the strap price over, you're also going to see some of these other flags jump, and that's because they are obeying the constraints that we looked at for the private constraints as well as the shared constraints. So we pulled the strap price over there, and let's pull seal price over as well as edge board price. And now you can see that this package would be worth 193. So we know right away that this is not a very good outcome for this negotiation, way below even the value of our prior contract. So, but I wanted to show you how we can very easily build and understand the worth of various outcomes once you've built a working infinity model with preferences well represented. So while we're talking about preferences, you're probably wondering what happens if preferences on a certain issue are not linear. If we look at return on sales here, every issue has a satisfaction graph behind it. And you can see here that around 9.9, 9.7, supplier satisfaction starts to fall more steeply. And after 9.9, he's fairly satisfied all the way up to the 23, where he's fully satisfied. If we want to look at another one, if we look at price index interval here, you'll see that the best outcome for supplier on this graph is actually around the 3 to 4 month mark, after which it gets too short. And when it's too long, that is also bad for the supplier. So we're going to close that graph. And the one thing that our steel strap supply simulation doesn't do is optioned issues, but I would invite you to reach out to us to ask us how those work, or try another video. They work just as well as the numerical issues. You would just be looking at a bar graph behind the issue instead of what you're seeing here. Okay, so let's start. I think we're ready to start negotiating. We want to start by putting this optimistic proposal on the table. So I'm going to right-click and propose that package, and it's going to show up in this window here called On the Table. And you can see that it showed up at the same time as this package from the buyer. So the reason it showed up at the same time is because when I send a proposal out, it goes to the neutral site, and then optimistic proposals from both parties are revealed simultaneously. In this case, I'm having the buyer, the opposite side, being played by a robot, and the robot's not doing all the explaining that I'm doing. So the robot's package was there before ours and was already waiting on the neutral site for us to send ours. So now we have these two packages. You can see that we've narrowed the negotiating ranges a little bit, but we're still quite a ways apart. And we can identify right away that 233 is worth much less to us than even the prior contract. So you can see that once you've got your preferences well represented here, analyzing options and proposals that come in is very, very quick and very, very easy. So the next thing we're going to do is generate some suggestions. You remember from the graph there that Smartsettle Infinity can generate suggestions for solutions, and they are going to fall in between the packages of the or the optimistic proposals of the supplier and the buyer. And while we're asking Infinity for a suggestion, the robot is going to be asking as well. So here we've got two suggestions to consider, package 3 and package 4. And we can again see right away that even package 3 here is not as good as our concession. And so I'm going to generate one more, because we're just in session 1 here. So we negotiate in sessions. And in session 1, we've decided not to go below our concession. But in session 2, we'll put that concession on the table. So here we've got package 5 and package 6 to consider now. Now package 5 at 552, that's actually worth the same as our concession. But if we take a look, we definitely have different values there. And this would actually be a really good opportunity for you to look over these two packages carefully and make sure they are indeed worth the same to you, that you would take one just as well as the other. And if not, why not? And then adjust your preferences accordingly. I'm going to say that I've got my preferences well defined, and I'm going to accept that package. So when I accept that, a little yellow dot appears here, and that's a secret acceptance marker, so that I know that I've accepted this package. And if buyer would accept the same package, then when we check for agreement at the end of the session, if we have a mutually accepted package, that package is going to become the baseline. So it looks like buyer did not accept that proposal. So we're now in session 2. So I've decided in session 2, I'm going to put my concession on the table. So I'm going to propose that, and it's going to show up here on the table list. And there it is, package 7. And buyer has also sent a proposal. Now at 376, we know that that's still not something that we're going to consider accepting at this time. Now we have another neat thing that we can do. See this resistance package here? I'm going to put this on the table as a masquerade. So that's going to make this package look just like a suggestion. And what that does is it removes any bias that buyer might have towards accepting something with my name attached. So that's going to show up right up there. Because you can see that these packages, instead of being ordered by their number, so the numbers are sequential, but we've got them ordered by how good or bad they are for the supplier. And of course, in buyer's view, his packages would be ordered according to his preferences instead of the supplier's preferences. So package 9 here was our resistance level, and it looks like the buyer has sent something here for us to consider in package 10 as well. And I'm going to right click and accept. So even though this was a proposal from us, because it's gone up as a suggestion, we do need to right click and actively accept it. And as package 10 is actually a little bit better for us than package 9, I'm going to right click and accept that one as well. Okay, so now I've accepted quite a few packages. I've actually gone down to my resistance level. So I'm going to end the session and check for agreement. And we got a deal here in package 10 worth 534. So that's already worth quite a bit more than our prior contract. Yeah, $33,000 more than the prior contract, so that's great. But now I want to run Smartsettle Infinity's big algorithm called maximize the minimum gain. So now what maximize the minimum gain is going to do is it's going to look really closely at my preferences, it's going to look really closely at buyer's preferences, and it's going to identify any value that we've left on the table. And then once it identifies that value, it's going to share that value as equally as possible between the parties. So this is a very complex process. You can see that Infinity's working really hard here, and it does take a little minute to run. So here we've got package 11, and you can see that that is an improvement. We've got an extra few $1,000s out of Infinity there. So we're going to right click and accept that package. And then that becomes our new baseline. Or sorry, it becomes our new final agreement. So I'm just going to take you back over to the PowerPoint just to look at what we did there. So from the supplier's point of view, the prior contract was worth $1,050,000. The Infinity baseline took us to $1,086,000, and then the Infinity improvement took us to $1,092,000. And this represents an annual value of $42,000 over the prior contract. And again, Smartsettle Infinity strives to share that value as fairly as possible. So for the buyer, we had a similar number, a $49,000 value over the prior contract. And just to remind you again that this was actually based on a real data with a real case. So this is real value that you're seeing here and not just data that we are presenting to you just for the sake of data. So anyway, thanks for listening, and please reach out if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to hear from you. And if you are interested in looking more closely at the data and looking at the constraints, for example, very happy to share that with you.